So over the course of about 3 days last week, Apple pulled and reinstated Epic's developer account in Sweden again. So this, I'm going to try and abridge all of this. It started with an exchange of emails between Phil Schiller and Tim Sweeney about getting assertions that Epic would follow the rules again and not like break rules like they did last time. Then Apple removed Epic's account again, in part because of public criticisms that Sweeney posted on X about Apple's response to the DMA, which is a wild thing for Phil Schiller to put in writing. Like, just like, I don't know what he's doing. Then the EU Commission, I think quite rightly, started asking questions about this. Then Apple reinstated them again. This is a stupid, petty mess to add on top of all of the other stupid messes that they're trying to deal with right now. This is absolutely superfluous, unnecessary, benefited nobody. I do not know why this happened.
Yeah, it was after I would say, basically a PR own goal of them putting down in their little letter about how they essentially view the App Store as a gift to everybody else, and that Spotify built a whole big successful business on Apple giving it to them for free. Which at the time, I think I said this last week, I thought, well, doesn't that make you look kind of dumb that was your business model that you stuck with? But also it just gets to the whole idea of Apple's attitude toward other people being involved in their platforms as being that Apple creates the value and they sort of suck the value away, which is not true. It's much more symbiotic than they would believe. But I think this shows just how rooted this mindset is, which is, and also, I got to say, a little bit baffling, and this is the thing, is I thought when I saw that letter from Phil Schiller basically saying, hey, Tim, reassure me you're not going to break the rules again. And his response was, I absolutely reassure you we will not break the rules again, and I will provide anything you want in writing to say that. The result was then that Apple then banned them and said they did it because they were mean to Apple. They dared to criticize Apple publicly. And it's like, well, wait a second. Fealty to Apple is not in the App Store rules, right? Yes. Like omerta, right? Like silence and do not talk about Apple and your relationship with Apple is not in the App Store rules, nor would it be legal for it to be there, especially in Europe. And so for them to do that, it shows you how petty and vindictive people at Apple can be. And it's a bad look when you're an incredibly powerful company. It's understandable to a certain extent when you're fighting for your life, which is, I think, why that attitude got ingrained in Apple. It was in the early Steve Jobs return era, and they were fighting for their lives. But I will say, also, I think it's just a Steve Jobs trait that has transferred to the company. He's always felt like he did great works, and everybody else made money off of it, and he felt like they were all just kind of leeching off of his greatness. And I just, bottom line, I've seen it. It happened in the relationship with Macworld and Macworld Expo. It's just a fact. And then I see it here and I think, oh yeah. And let's be clear. I'm just going to be honest. Look, I've worked with a lot of great people at Apple over the years. But I've seen this firsthand that if you do stuff Apple doesn't like, they won't say so necessarily, but they'll punish you. Like they'll forget you on the next round of whatever, of review units or whatever. Like it has happened to me multiple times, to people I know multiple times. And in this, I was getting the flashbacks, which is it's like, oh, we're going to, Phil Schiller assures Sweeney that if he gives him gives him his word, basically, they'll let them back in. Probably knowing that the European Commission wants them to let them back in. And Sweeney, who is not a compliant guy, right? I find him unpleasant and he has a real attitude. And his response to Phil is like, yes, Phil, anything. I assure you, and we will provide anything you want. And then, they're also doing their public publicity campaign against Apple's policies. And that's what gets you kicked out is daring to speak your dissent to the powerful gatekeeper. Well, that's certainly not going to play well in the regulatory environment where they're trying to shut down powerful gatekeepers. Yeah. But I found the whole thing telling and offensive, And I I feel like Apple's relationship with regulators and developers about the App Store needs a reset. And while Phil really Phil fixed a lot of things that were wrong with the App Store when he came back. Because remember, Eddie was in charge of this, and I think didn't really care about it. And Phil Schiller came in, took it over, and if you think relationships with Apple and developers are bad now, you should have seen it back then. The number of arbitrary rejections and some of the rules, like a lot of things changed for the better. At this point, though, when I look at stuff like this, I feel like there needs to be some new blood in this relationship. Like almost politically, you need to sort of say, no, we're going to put somebody new in charge of this stuff, and they're gonna be able to sort of like say, okay, we're going to reset and we're going to change the rules a little bit, and we're going to. It's not going to be like it was, because this is so poisonous that I'm not sure how.
This is just bad. Like,
I'm not sure how Phil Schiller can represent Apple in this stuff. And that's not to say that he hasn't done some good stuff and isn't a really smart guy. But I feel like this is this can't continue like this. This is
it's different people for different phases, right? Eddie was good for getting it set up. Phil has been good for like building it up to this powerhouse that it is and giving more options to developers for how they make money and this kind of stuff. But maybe there is a new mindset needed for the regulation era of the App Store.
Yes,
because
Apple's
quite frankly, like it's a long email that Phil wrote to Tim, but essentially it boils down to the fact that you broke the rules in the past. And your criticism is why we're not letting you in. And so really what it means is it's the criticism.
It's the criticism.
They reinstated the account knowing full well what they'd done in the past. So the only thing that had changed is Tim Sweeney was tweeting about it. And that is an absolutely unacceptable reason to deny anyone to be in the App Store, let alone one of the biggest game makers in the world, probably the biggest game maker in the world, which should be on the platform.
Why do you think I have anonymous people who do the Apple report card every year? Honestly, this is the thing: is if you want things out of Apple, I mean, it's not necessarily if I'm on the record criticizing Apple, Apple's going to pull me from the App Store, my perfectly fine app. But it does mean like, oh, now I'm not going to get help with my app, or now I'm not going to get my app featured in the App Store, or whatever. Now my icon is never going to appear on a slide at WWDC. It's petty stuff like that absolutely happens. So that's the problem here, and that's why I think there needs to be a reset. And I don't know what it's going to take. What's it going to take? Is this what it's going to take? Is it a $2 billion fine that it's going to take? Is it going to be a future fine that's even larger from the EC? That is what it's going to take.
The overall company turnover, right?
Right.
Those are the fines that are on the line for the DMA.
So I don't know what it's going to take, but and I know we've talked about this a lot in the past, but now there's even more teeth to it. Apple's not playing the game it thinks it's playing. It's not playing the game it was playing 5 years ago, certainly not 10 years ago or 15 years ago. And yet it's acting like it is. It's acting like it's an upstart that's just trying to make it and figuring things out, and it's like it's 2009. And it's not. It's 2024. You're a giant. You're making huge amounts of money and acting in a way that is that is imperious and dangerous and arrogant and threatening to all of those who are not as powerful as you, who you hold sway over, which is everybody. And again, just to be clear about this, the whole DMA and the whole EC thing, the whole idea there, the concept behind it is that there are certain gatekeepers so powerful that they exert an undue amount of power over everybody. And so it's bad for businesses and consumers. Nothing reinforces that than trying to rule by fear, which is effectively what Apple has been and continues to do.
But
and
there's
no better example than this.
I would actually
literally say do not criticize us or we will make your business break.
This is the best example. I can't recall ever seeing in writing an Apple executive telling a developer, we are not going to allow you in the App Store because you were mean.
Yeah.
And it is
because you
wild
disagree
to
with us
me.
about our business.
Yes.
And you said it out loud. You can disagree with us all you like as long as you never tell anybody and act like you like it. That's
wild.
the policy.
Of all
Yeah.
the times to do this. That's why I made that comment about writing it down. The fact that this is written down is like, have you learned nothing? Like,
Yeah. But I just want to spell this out again, though, just to say this is entirely consistent. Anyone who wants to tell me that this is an aberration and it's because it's Tim Sweeney and all of that and that Apple doesn't normally act this way, talk to someone who knows better, because talk to a developer who's had a run-in with Apple, talk to somebody in the press who's had a run-in with Apple. This is how Apple has operated for more than a decade, for at least 15 years, probably more like 20 years, 25 years. I don't know. Pretty close to as long as I've been doing this. They play hardball, and they're, like I said, it was never fun, but they are so powerful now, and this is the result. Is this? And it's not necessary. It is not necessary. I firmly believe that Apple can compete on its own merits. And that's the part that really bugs me about all of this. And I don't know if it's just why should we change the thing that we've done that's been so successful, whether there's some arrogance attached to that. I mean, I think there is. But I think that there must be an underlying fear going on here as well, because I don't think Apple needs to play like this to win. But they feel like they, right? It's like if you let it be a more fair playground, more fair playing field, what do you think is going to happen? I think Apple would do well, but I guess their attitude is, why find out? And it's just the worst. Why find out? Why
find out?
If we
Why
own
bother?
the refs,
Why bother?
if we own the refs, I mean, we've got a good team. We've got a really good team. We probably got the best team, but we also own the refs and the stadium and the field. So why should we even risk it, right? We've got to buy. This is a win. The Washington Generals might show up, but that's going to be it. We are going to own it. And that's the part that drives me crazy, is that I think that they can, not only do I think that they could succeed on the merits, it would actually force them to make an effort in some places maybe where they don't make an effort, and that would make it better for developers and better for users.
Yep.
But instead we're left with this sort of naked bullying that's happening, and it's outrageous. And I hope, and again, I don't like Epic particularly, and I don't like Tim Sweeney particularly, but boy, he managed to get some real clarity about Apple's behavior toward developers with this.
And I will just, hopefully this is going to be the last point. We can move on. But look, we clearly both really care about this, right? And I think,
yeah.
But for me, I feel like I'm seeing a lot online of anti-Europe sentiment about this whole thing happening. But for me, this is why it's happening. Because without the European Commission, no one would have changed this decision. If this was a decision that before the DMA, that was the end of this, right? Phil Schiller sends this email to Tim Sweeney, done. And because that was what they decided.
Like the last 15, literally,
Yes.
What you're describing is the last 15 years, where if you get on Apple's bad side, if you don't do what they want, you're out. That's
and
it.
They
there's no judge.
Changed this decision because the European Commission told them to.
Yeah.
And so they did it.
Yep.
So this is why we need it. Someone has to change this.
Look,
and
there are
it's Europe.
aspects. I think that there are reasonable criticisms of governments trying to get results through legislation that don't necessarily get the results that they want. But I think this is a really good example of what happens when oversight is added to a process where there was none. In very simple terms, there was no oversight, and now there is actual oversight. And that's the only reason that this whole thing happened, and that Epic Sweden has its account back.
Yep. And this is, I would prefer for it not to be a government too. But we've been asking for years for Apple to do something about this, and they've decided not to.
We've talked about this a lot. We live in an era, we were talking about this in terms of Tim Cook in China at one point, right? We live in an era where, when I was a kid, I used to read science fiction about the future. Whoa, the future, where corporations were more powerful than governments. Well, we live in the present where corporations are more powerful than most world governments and as powerful as many other world governments. And this is a case where who is going to solve this issue anywhere? And the answer is the entire European Union can take on Apple. That's what it takes. That's what it takes. Maybe South Korea a little bit, the Netherlands a little bit. It takes government actors, and I'm not saying that governments are the best use of this, but like, who else is there? Who is as powerful and can make these companies do what they want? There's nobody else.
Yep.
They are so powerful, and they have such a stronghold on parts of our world that it's necessary. We have another item in DMA today, by the way, but I think it is all of the same thing, which is criticism of some of Apple's policies that leads to changes in policies that I'm skeptical would ever have been made otherwise. Because again, there's a hammer now with the EC.
Because I guess it is worth noting, I should have mentioned this at the top, the DMA is now in effect. So
yes,
in between the last two episodes.
Happy DMA Day to all.
It's happened now.
Who celebrate.
So this is where, and this is why I think the Epic thing could be changed, because, well, now there are the rules. The rules are in place. And so everybody has to get in line.